Okay, so the first question for tonight is, so my school has pre-calculus but no AP. Should I try to take AP pre-calculus outside of school? Does it make much difference? First of all, AP pre-calculus is a brand new offering from AP. It was just introduced, I think, this past year. So don't worry about it if your school doesn't have it. Colleges won't hold it against you based on what's available for your curriculum. Now, having said that, if you do have a pre-calculus or an honors pre-calculus class at your school that's pretty rigorous, you should talk to the teacher and see if you can go ahead and just self-study for the AP pre-calculus test. I'm normally not a fan of self-studying for something that you would go out of your way to learn, but it'd be the same thing as if you're taking a rigorous like honors English class, for instance, like a junior English class. If they don't offer AP, you could take the AP Lang test and, probably do pretty well on it. So you could probably do the same. I wouldn't go out of my way to take an actual like transcript class outside of your school. That would seem to be a waste of time and energy, especially if you're also taking pre-calculus at your school. Colleges don't really want to see you taking things outside of your school if it's an offering at your school, or at least a comparable offering, right? So no, don't do that. And in the grand scheme of things, AP pre-calculus also probably won't get you a lot of useful credits for colleges, to be honest, right? Because pre-calculus isn't a college level math class. So yes, it might give you some elective credits by the time you get to your college, but it's not going to get you out of any classes because you presumably wouldn't be taking pre-calculus by the time you get to college anyway. Okay. Next is if we hope to get into UCs or USC and have to choose between taking higher level calculus versus the BeaverWorks summer program, which one would help a rising senior more, the intended major is STEM? I don't really think you have to choose. You can always find an asynchronous calculus class during the summer that you can take, on your own time. BeaverWorks shouldn't be that intensive where you're going to be working late nights. It'll probably be a fairly kind of like busy day, but not something that would occupy the entirety of your day. You could probably go ahead and do an evening or, like I said, an asynchronous college class at the same time. Okay, next is can my son apply to Stanford REA and to Georgia Tech and USC EA? Yes. So Stanford does have sort of a provision where they allow students to apply even if they're applying for USC EA, because USC makes it a what do you call this, a condition that you have to apply EA to be considered for merit aid. So that's the one sort of loophole to the idea that you have to only apply to public EAs. Georgia Tech is a public EA, so that's not a conflict with Stanford's REA rules. Okay, next is some out-of-state colleges rank 50 to 75 nationally. Should I choose them or community college, then transfer later? Oh, no. I would prefer that you go to a ranked 50 to 75 national university. You're rolling dice a little bit with community college because, for one, you don't know whether or not you're going to just be able to finish and get all the classes you need in 2 years. It'd be much, much better for you to go ahead and go into a top 75 school because there are schools in that range that are still very competitive, right? So, because you never know, like, unless you're ultra convinced that you're going to get straight A's at community college. And even then, you just don't know, life can throw things at your way. And, even if you're thinking that you're going to be able to get A's easily at community college, if you have one or two bad semesters, then that entirely derails your plans. So that's probably not a good idea. So just get into the best school that you can get into first. That's a 4-year. You can also transfer from a 4-year like an out-of-state public university to a UC if you feel like that's better suited for you. Now, granted, obviously, the community colleges in California receive preferential consideration by these UCs, but it's not impossible. It's very much possible that you could transfer to a UC from another 4-year university. Next is ED hard to get financial aid? No, not necessarily. So what you do with ED is that they'll oftentimes give you an approximate award. You can also check on every college has to have something called a net price calculator or a financial aid calculator on their website. And so you can use that to sort of estimate how much financial aid you're expected to get. Oftentimes it's going to be very, very close, and they're going to give you an updated thing later on. So no, not at all, right? If you're eligible for aid based on your income, it shouldn't really matter if it's an ED school or not. Now, of course, on the downside, ED does preclude the possibility of shopping around for different financial offers, because if you got accepted, then you have to go there. So oftentimes for students who are considering ED to boost their chances of getting in, then of course, that's definitely something you're going to have to factor in, that you wouldn't be able to kind of like shop around, I guess, as much. Okay, next is, should a rising freshman be productive in the summer or relax before starting high school? I mean, it's probably your last year to actually just do things for fun, to be honest, right? I mean, you could do things to get started for high school. I think that wouldn't be a bad idea, right? If there's subjects that you think you might be potentially weak in, that would be good. Or just, a shorter summer program to kind of like check out or explore a possible major. I think that would be a good use of your summer. But no, you shouldn't burn yourself out before high school starts for sure, right? Okay, next. Oh, there are a couple of questions in the. Okay, so I guess they had to be translated for us. Okay, so NYU, free tuition for families, income lower than 100K. What about assets? I think that's definitely something you're going to have to contact NYU about, because I don't know the specifics in terms of like, what you would have in terms of assets for that. Will it lower students' chances if they apply NYU financial aid? No, never. Right. So NYU should be need blind. Right. So that's a separate application. It doesn't get factored in. So granted, you could take a look at the lists, but a lot of the top 30 schools are most likely going to be need blind. So that's definitely something you're going to want to check in that process. So it shouldn't really impact your admissions if you're applying for financial aid. In fact, for many of these schools, because they're actively recruiting students who have like potentially lower income, it's not a negative if you have to apply for financial aid. I think that is a misconception. It's only really, really kind of like smaller schools that don't really have a lot of, like endowment or smaller budgets that might have a problem if you're going to require a lot of financial aid. Not anything in the top 50, right? That should not be a problem for you. Okay, next is, I heard some top schools such as Stanford have mandatory interviews in the admissions process. Could you give some school examples? No, there's no such thing as a mandatory interview. You can always turn down an interview. No one's going to force you to do an interview if you don't want to do an interview. But, anything like that, of course, probably doesn't send a good signal if you don't want to do an interview. So, as someone who's been doing interviews for many, many years in the past for Harvard, definitely, I would say, sure. I mean, it might not look as good if I have to put in my form that you've declined the interview. But if you have valid reasons for you not to do the interview because you think it's not going to reflect well on you, by policy, these colleges do have to view it as a non-factor. Right. So definitely, have to think about that. But, barring some sort of major anxiety issues about, like speaking to strangers, public speaking, there should be no reason why you couldn't be able to do an interview as long as you're prepared for it. Okay. Next is, I go to a small private school where some AP classes are online with a third-party platform. Should I take these classes or take community college corresponding classes and the NOAA test instead? They're both online. It will both be calculated. I would say if this is something that's part of your school's offerings, then try to take advantage of that first, because that's definitely something that your school's secondary school report would mention. So they would prefer that you take the ones that are available at your school. If there are certain offerings, for example, that you can't satisfy through this, then it's okay for you to look at other resources like community college. Okay. Next is, my daughter's a California resident, I guess, but right now she is in a top international school in China. If she applies for the UCs, is it local school or international school better? Okay, there's so much variety there. I would say if she's already going to a top international school, that's probably going to be a much more solid education there rather than like going to a California high school. But, as far as like, even if she's a California resident, she'd be viewed in terms of the curriculum as an international student. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next is, if I apply as an engineering major, does it help more to take an intro to engineering class at community college or take a 4 weeks robotic camp in the summer? I mean, both could be valuable. You might want to see, like I mentioned to the previous question, if you can do both. If it's not necessarily a forced choice, you could try to see if maybe you can take an asynchronous engineering class or take one with a schedule that doesn't necessarily conflict with your robotics camp. Worst case scenario, you can always take the intro to engineering class maybe during the school year if you think you can fit it in, because you're probably not going to be able to take a 4-week robotics camp in the school year, obviously, right? Okay, is the SAT essay still available? Nope. Colleges don't look at it. It's defunct. It's not an option anymore. Okay, they found that it's not really that useful. Okay, next is a student applied for summer schools, SIP and RMP. One is waiting list. How many opportunities are there? In addition, RMP has been interviewed, but teachers said they're a top summer school and have to wait for 10 days before replying. What? Okay. Not sure about that. Is there still hope? SIP will normally have a ton of available because they have a wide range of projects. One of the things that I normally recommend is just writing to SIP saying you're open to other research fields that you didn't initially put down. That might give you a chance to be considered for other ones. So yeah, so in the past, we've had students get accepted off the wait list to SIP. Okay. Uh, let's see. Just please explain how to apply for Division III schools. I think that's probably a question best asked to your well, Division III schools are like any other schools. If you're talking about sports recruiting, that's a different thing. You're going to need to talk to your coach, but it shouldn't be any different. Division III schools, Division I. If you're talking about non-sport related stuff, you just apply like any other normal college. If you're talking about applying for scholarship purposes for like sports, for instance, or just potentially recruiting, talk to your coach first and then try to go ahead and like try to see if you can establish contact with the coaches for whatever activity or sport that you're thinking of for Division III. Okay, so we got a couple more questions and I guess we'll call it a night. The student has taken chemistry over summer and needs to choose between AP chemistry and get a grade of B. Well, I don't know if you want to be that sort of initially pessimistic, or AP environmental science and get an A. Is grade or rigor more important in senior year? Well, if you're positive you're going to get a B, I mean, depending on your major, if you're thinking of maybe going for pre-med or anything natural sciences, I would still take the shot of trying to take AP chemistry and just use part of the summer to go ahead and prepare. You just need to really get an A for that first semester, right? That's the most important thing. If you think you can pull off an A in the first semester, even if you end up getting a B in the second semester, senior year, it'll still be worth it for you to go ahead and take AP chemistry. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know your prior academic record. So if you think you can get the A still in AP chemistry, I would for sure do it. If you know pretty much like history of like, you know, the teacher doesn't really give A's that often, then I suppose you can go for AP environmental science. It also really just depends on what you're thinking of majoring in. You know, at the end of the day, if you could maybe put down environmental science as your major, then maybe going for environmental science might not be a bad option. Okay. All right. Next is, does the school use a different comparison pool for applicants with low income family? Different comparison pool? No, they don't pool you necessarily. They do factor that in terms of low income as being something they consider. Like obviously it would, you know, some schools will give preference for that because they do want to have like socioeconomic diversity as well. So in that sense, that is a factor. It, you know, will be considered, but they don't lump you into a pool and consider you only against other low income kids, for instance. That's not how it works. So it could be something where because of your low income, if you had to show more adversity, you know, overcoming more adversity, that could be a factor that could, you know, bode more, you know, favorably for you in the admissions process. And the last question, I guess, is some summer programs list physics and chemistry as prerequisites. Are they absolutely necessary? Depends on the program. If they say it's absolutely necessary, it's absolutely necessary, right? So it just depends on the actual program. Some say it's recommended. You may want to write the specific summer programs in that case. Okay.